Hi all, in this lab, let us understand how to implement the Lambda integration with API gateway. So in this case, let us talk about two types of integration. One is the Lambda proxy integration, the other one is the custom integration. Okay. So in the Lambda proxy integration, we are not going to make any changes to the input and output. Okay. But in the custom integration, it's a possibility that we can transform the input request and also the output from the Lambda. I mean, that is a backend. Okay. Now let's get started. So we have one API, REST API, and it's called Lambda Proxy API, and it's of type regional. And it has one resource called slash resource, and it has get and put methods. The get method is using proxy integration. That means it's not possible for any changes. And the put method is using a custom. So that means we can make the transformation for the input and output. And the put is also using an ID field, so we can pass some extra parameter. Now slash resource slash proxy plus is another resource, so that can be like a generic one. So any path starting with the slash resource slash any such path is actually triggering this API. Okay, so it will be, it's like a catch-all. Okay, now with respect to the methods, it is using any, that means any method like HTTP, put, get, post, head, any such HTTP verbs are possible with this resource. Now on the backend side, we have three functions. One is Lambda proxy single and a Lambda custom function, Lambda proxy any method. Okay. Now each of these three API methods are referring to these three functions. Okay. Now when the client sends a request with a JSON object which contains name, age, and email. Now if it's a custom, then the transformation can happen. For example, here we have a new field called body is equal to the input JSON file. So this is a transformation happening on the input request. This is only possible for the custom integration, that is the put method. Okay, but for the get and the any, that means the slash resource get function API calls, or the slash resource slash proxy plus any, for these two API calls, transformation is not possible. Okay, now when the request goes to the Lambda, it will process a message and send the response back. Let us say the message is the field which is included in the part of the response output. Okay, so if that is the case, so what will happen to this? Okay, now if it is a custom integration, then we are going to add one more field called message underscore details. So this is extra field which is inserted into the method response before sending back to the client. Okay, so this is possible only for the custom integration. Now let us go to the source code and see how to implement this architecture. So in this lab, we are going to talk about the source code for the implementation of the Lambda integration demo, right? So let us first go to the Lambda, API gateway code. Okay. So here, let us talk about the high level API. So we are creating one API called Lambda integration API. It's a type REST API, and independent type is regional. And the body of this API, the specification is coming from an open API spec. Okay, so we are passing few parameters to this template file. Now if I go to the openai.yaml file, so here we are creating one resource called slash resource. So it is of type get method, and the integration type is Lambda. So AWS proxy is the Lambda integration, and this Lambda proxy integration. So there is no customization possible, and this is the URI. This is the Lambda function that we are calling, and there is a IAM role which is required to call Lambda function. And one more method is put, and this is of type if you see AWS, this is a custom integration, so you can make the changes to the input and output to this API. So for example, here again we are passing the role, and this is a Lambda function, and for the default HTTP 200 code, we are actually doing this transformation. Okay, so for the, this is for the response template, and this is for the request template. So here you see the message underscore details is extra field added in the response. For the request, so what we are doing is we are taking all the input object and creating a new field called body. Body is equal to this. Okay. Now from the way it is created is the age name and email are taken from the JSON object, and the ID is taken from the parameter, okay, query parameter. So the way it is constructed is using the vector template language, VTL. Okay. Now there is one more configuration, pass through behavior when no template, which is a default recommended option. Now we have one more resource called slash resource slash proxy plus. This is like a catch-all. So any path starting with the slash resource slash any random path will be matched to this. Okay. So here we are using any method. Okay. So we are using one parameter which is proxy, which is part of path. Okay, and it's required. And there's a Lambda ARN that we are configuring to match. Okay, so this is the specification for the API. Okay, now let's go back to the main code. So then if you scroll down to the bottom, you will see a definition for the deployment and the stage. Okay, so here we are creating one stage called dev, and we are creating a deployment. Okay, now it is very straightforward because most of the specification is happening from the open API, right? We are not doing anything here in Terraform. Now let us deploy this, and so before that, let's go to the Lambda functions also. Here we have defined three Lambda functions. One is a proxy single, and the second one is proxy any, and the third one is custom function. Okay, all of them are using the same Lambda code in this folder. So if I go to this particular Lambda example code, so it's a simple response which is simply hello from Lambda is what is being returned. Okay, now let us go to the console and see how this looks like. So we are in API Gateway console, and this is the API REST API regional endpoint. And here, if you see, we have slash resource and two methods, get and put. In the get method, if you see, the integration type is Lambda, and proxy Lambda proxy integration is true. That means we cannot do any transformations, right? So this is a function, and the integration response is empty here because since it's of type Lambda proxy, so we'll not be able to make any changes. Similarly, the put is basically Lambda integration, but it's a custom integration. So the Lambda proxy is false. That means we can make some changes. So if you see the mapping template here, so what we are doing is this is the input, and we are creating one more field which is body. So the body is assigned to all of this field. So this is what is being sent to the Lambda. So when the client sends this JSON file, we are creating one more JSON object with the data from the input and sending it to the Lambda, which is a backend. Then in the integration response, if you see the default response is 200, again we are doing the transformation. So we are adding one extra field. Okay, so whatever is coming from Lambda is inserted here into the message, but we are adding one more message underscore details field, and the method response is also a default. Now this is how it looks like. Now if I go to the proxy plus and there's any method, so here the integration type is Lambda. Again, it's a proxy integration. That means no changes is possible. Then integration response and method response are default values. Okay. Now let's go ahead and test this. Okay. In the console, and then we'll go to the CLI. Okay. So let us go to the proxy plus and any method, and we'll go to the test. So we are using any method, and let me select post as the option. Okay. Um, and send a request. So I did not provide any other parameter. All I did is just post, and this is the response I got from Lambda, hello from Lambda. Okay. And if you see, there's no changes to the response. So whatever the response come from Lambda, so the same thing. For example, endpoint response before transformation is this, and method response body after transformation also this. It's the same thing, right? So there's no changes happened because it's a Lambda proxy integration. Okay. Now let us do the testing for the custom integration. Since we know that the put API is using the custom integration, so if you see it's a custom integration here. Okay. So in the put method, if you see the integration request type is false. Lambda proxy integration is false, which means it's a custom integration. Okay. Now let's go ahead and test this. Okay. So what we will do is we will pass one input called ID. The value is 9. In the request body, we will send one JSON file and let us do the test. Okay. Now, if you see the response from the API is message field is there and the message detail. This is the one which is inserted. Okay. Now, if you go back to the logs and see the method response after the transformation is this, and so if you go back to the logs, you can see method response. Response body before transformation is this. So it has only one field called message, but method response body after the transformation is all having one more field. Okay, so this means the custom integration is working. Okay, now let's go to the CLI and test this. Okay, so in the CLI, first what we will be doing is let's get the URL of the endpoint. Okay, so this is the URL, and if I simply make a call to the proxy plus, it will be giving a hello from Lambda. Okay, and so if I put um, you know the put message, put if I use the put method and on the resource of that on the top level API, you will see that the extra field is getting added, right? Message and message details. So this is how we can test either through CLI or through the console the Lambda integration, both the Lambda proxy integration and the custom integration, where we can make some changes to the response. Okay.